I don't have a full grasp of. I know enough, and what I've tried to do with this presentation is I've tried to give you enough material for you to be able to go and look at the detail, because as with most things, the devil remains within the detail of the three things I'm going to talk to you about. So, how do I move on, Dwight? Oh, so there you go. Caveat, so beware of what I tell you today. This presentation, if you're bothered, can be downloaded from our website, laston.org.uk/presentations. There's a slide share there too. I would encourage you to have a look at it, because I've got a quarter of an hour today and no clock worrying me.
I'll give you a 5 minutes and I'll give you
brilliant.
2 minutes.
So there's a lot of links in this presentation which I'm not going to take you through today, but where there's underlinings and that sort of stuff, it should be reasonably straightforward. Okay, so I wanted to start out with what I've called the donut of hope. It's now 180 days since the last election, and there's 1,645 days to go. I'm sure there's hope. We're 10% through, just over. Part of the reason why I'm telling you this is because a lot has changed even in the last few months, and we are barely through the initial changes, and I think it's worth you being aware that there's probably a lot more to come. And so what I'm going to be showing you today is some stuff which indicates direction of travel. But hope, I'll get onto that at the end. So next, this looks fantastic, doesn't it? I'm going to tell you about the National Health Service changes to Overseas Visitors Regulations 2015, which were enabled by, there's three big acts I'm talking to you about. One's to do with health charging, which we've already touched upon. The next one is to do with how much people get, asylum support levels, and then the last bit is about immigration bill, which is currently going through the Lords. So there's three areas that I'm looking at today, and I'm going to try and be quite brief about them. I'm acutely aware of the fact that there are people in the room who know more about this than me, so feel free to heckle or throw things, or even contribute. So in essence, we touched on some of the stuff around NHS charging. The format of this, I'm going to say what the legislation says and then what the impact is, and do that for each of the areas we're looking at. So essentially, the NHS charges that are enabled by the Immigration Act 2014, I am only talking about asylum seekers and refugees here. It covers lots of things. It covers migrants and people, irregular migrants and people who've been here for a particular length of time. I cannot do justice to the breadth and complexity of this, but I can talk to you about the stuff I know about, which is asylum seekers and refugees. So primary care, going to the GP, should be free at the point of delivery. There should be no charging at all around that. And that only those people who are ordinarily resident in the UK, that's been changed by the legislation, will be eligible for secondary care. Secondary care, going to the hospital, stuff that happens outside of a GP surgery is a rule of thumb. As Rose correctly said, urgent or necessary treatment, including MET treatment, will be given, but charges will be made for secondary care. So you can get it, but what they will do is they will tell you how much it's cost and then attempt to pursue you for it. It also says, now then you see it does work when you do that. Non-urgent treatment should not be provided unless an estimated full charge is received in advance of treatment. That's quite a worrying phrase. There are people who are exempt from charging, and that includes refugees, people with humanitarian protection. I'm not going to read this out, it's all there for you. So there are some exempted people, there's a further piece of legislation which talks about a £200 a year fee for people who've got limited leave to remain, so essentially people who are in the country for less than 5 years. In terms of legislation, so essentially we should still be able to get TB and measles and vaccinations, some vaccinations for free. If you're sectioned under the Mental Health Act and you're subject to compulsion, you get that for free. That feels right and proper. Or to a lot of asylum law doesn't feel right or proper, but that's a good decision. Sexually transmitted infections, HIV and family planning should also still be free, and for the time being emergency services. There is discussion and mention in the paper about how emergency services may not be free in the future. We've got some primary legislation through that is casting doubt on some of that. How manageable any of this is down to our friends the clinicians and the hospital managers and other things. However, it is a worrying thing that that's in the primary legislation. Everything else, so primary care, free. This stuff, free. Everything else is chargeable and usually payable in advance. And it falls to the secondary care providers, the trusts, to be recovering that or getting hold of it. I've put this slide on because essentially there's a lot of confusion. Fear, fear, uncertainty and doubt is what this legislation has largely created amongst our friends within the NHS. There are different rules for England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Different categories of people are subject to charging in different ways. It is a dog's breakfast, and I cannot do justice to exactly who and under what circumstances in a way that is followable or that will be less than 15 minutes. The impact of charging around this are substantial, and Rose and others have spoken very eloquently about the impact that charging has. I think one of the things that's really important to say here is that those people who fall outside of being an asylum seeker or refugee, where, for example, that a claim for asylum has been turned down, they can get support under Section 4 if they apply for it. But one of the grounds for claiming Section 4 is on grounds of health, and how you get proof of the fact that you have a health need to be able to claim basic support, the princely sum of £35.75 a week, how you're able to be able to prove that when you ain't got access is moot. Also, it's worth bearing in mind that some of the ways in which people will establish your right to be exempt from charging or to charge you will be based on your papers. If you do not have your papers with you, then you cannot establish your right to either exemption or otherwise. Part of the process of applying for support means giving up your papers. Also, your solicitor, in putting your case together, may also have a need for you to give up your papers. So this requires a great deal of ID, different kinds of ID. Bugger, 5 minutes.
5 minutes left.
Right, okay. It's complicated. Asylum support rates. This is all footnoted, you can go and download it. Asylum support rates have been reduced for families with children by quite considerable amounts. If you look on here, the old amount and the new amount and the difference. So single parents with two children are looking at a weekly reduction of £39 a week. That came in August. This has huge levels of impact, like anybody who has their weekly budget cut by 20% and more. Bear in mind, this is substantially lower than the income support rates, which are the rates that we have set in Britain for saying this is a basic level of subsistence, and except if you're an asylum seeker. So, there's lots of research saying having money is bad for you, bad for your health, bad for your family, doesn't allow you to keep body and soul together, dispiriting conversations with people about whether or not they can afford soap or sanitary protection. These are real life conversations that are happening at the moment. And people are relying more on food banks, and some food banks can't cater for people without recourse to public funds. And so the choices are getting more and more limited. If the government policy is to create a climate where it's very difficult to survive, I think they've been quite successful. If you think about £35 a week, and you think about how much a day rate costs, even if you go from food provider to food provider to food provider on a day-to-day basis, you do that 4 times a week, 16 quid, you're already up to half of the amount of money that you've got. The immigration bill is even longer, and I'm not going to do justice to it. The only bit I'm going to talk about is support. This is the thing that's not yet law. So the previous two are in law. NHS charging, in law. We voted for it, well. Anyway, the second bit around asylum rates, that's done. We're trying to still appeal and say this is an unfair law, and making people, families subsist on even less money is wrong and dangerous. and we're trying to lobby for that, but that's on the statute book, that's done. The immigration bill, I've got 2 minutes left, is that all right?
3.
3 minutes, fantastic. I might do all night. The immigration bill is still being contested at the moment, and it's in the House of Lords. It's gone through its second reading. Support levels. What it's saying is that there's a potential removal of support to refused asylum-seeking families and their children, and also a loss of a right to appeal. What does that actually mean? What it means is that families who are at the end of process at the moment, they can apply to and get money to be able to keep body and soul together if they can't return. So talking about removing that, this is all about central government, Home Office, shifting the cost away from centre to the locality, because your local areas, our local councils, still have a duty under Section 17 of the Children Act to prevent children from being homeless. That means that they will still have a legal duty to stop homeless asylum-seeking children from having to sleep rough. That means that they're going to have a big choice ahead of them. Do they keep the family together as they do at the moment, or do we have large, widespread children being taken into care and their parents being left? That's the worst case scenario, and I'm quite sure it will not come to that, because, you know, we've got human rights legislation for the time being. So I think at the moment, this bill that's going through, there's a lot of good information knocked out by humans still here, who will do a point-by-point rebuttal. And Lisa's done a fantastic kind of response to the government's paper, proposed bill, saying why this won't work. Importantly, one of the largest reasons for bringing this in is to try and encourage families to go home and to make people destitute in order to get them to leave. Bizarrely, we tried this before in wrong slide. We tried this before in 2003 under Section 9 of the existing legislation. What they did was 113 families had support removed from them, from the centre, and every one of them went to the local council and had support from under the Children Act. None of them went home. Oh, we don't know, because a third of those families with children went missing. A third of those families went missing. If that's the case, then we're looking at safeguarding issues, we're looking at issues around exploitation and trafficking, we're forcing people into terrible, dreadful situations. I've got less than a minute left. Why is it not an oh dear moment? I encourage you to watch this video when you have time. A lot of this we can just sit there and go, shit, the world's a terrible place, and we didn't even vote for this, and look at what they're doing. And we can crawl into a hole and go, the world is ending. I believe, and passionately, my organisation, and so does City of Sanctuary, and everyone else who works in this room, I think with refugees and asylum seekers, believe in strategic optimism. This means that we don't accept that the world is necessarily getting worse, because if we give up hope, we may as well jack it all in, and we may as well say to the people who come to this country looking for safety that we have also given up. I don't think we can afford to do that. We start small and don't expect to change the world. There's always stuff that you can do, and be aware you may not change the whole damn system, but by starting where you work, the people that you work with your authorities, with the people who are in charge of your institutions, by talking with them about how we can be welcoming, compassionate humans and treat other humans with respect, we will make an enormous difference. The Donut of Hope, Part 2. And I'm overrun, and I'm giving it back. Since, in the first 2 or 3 months of this year, my organisation had 15 people want to come and become volunteers. Since August, we've had 123 people step up and say we want to be helpful. So I think that there is every reason for hope. People want things to be different, even if the government don't, and we can try and put pressure on the government to make the laws different if we disagree with them. Thank you.